Hey guys, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Julia Lee, and I'm your host for Let's Chat Cyber Session 2022. It's the year for cybersecurity as digitalization continues to really advance. And we've seen that businesses more than ever continue to rely on digital tools for work as well as for personal. But throughout the year, we all need to really improve our cyber resiliency in order to decrease the effects of potential cyber crimes. That's why in today's session, we'll be discussing everything cybersecurity privacy. And joining us today is no other than Cat Coode, a data privacy and global regulation compliance expert. She's the founder of Binary Tattoo, which helps companies become privacy regulation compliant and help individuals safeguard their online privacy. She's also backed by 2 decades of experience in mobile development and software architecture, as well as certification in data privacy law. Cat helps corporations and individuals better understand cybersecurity and data privacy, which are 2 very big hot topics, especially as we're stepping into the new year. And thank you so much, Cat, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Wonderful. Well, privacy and cybersecurity, as we know, there's a lot of interconnections on those 2 hot topics. And as people become more reliant on technology and continue to give up their personal information to various companies, we've seen it to banks and other online sources, privacy protection becomes more important than ever. Overall, privacy protection relies on effective cybersecurity implementation by organizations to really secure our personal data. So as I've noted, we're going to be discussing in the next hour all things privacy. So let's get started and hear what she has to say. First question for today, Kat. Along with all your engagements, you regularly invest time in educating the public around privacy. Why is privacy conscious society important to you? And really, what inspired you to become a privacy champion?
Oh, awesome question. I was on Facebook in 2007 when it was fairly new, and I was posting pictures of everything in my life because I didn't really have an understanding. But I worked at BlackBerry for a really long time, and I was there when iPhone was launched. And what happened was people were really excited about the interconnectedness of iPhone and the ability to pull your contacts into this app or that app. And we were looking at that from the BlackBerry side going, no, that's not right. Like, we had created an operating system intentionally to silo your data, to protect it. And people weren't seeing that. They were seeing the coolness factor of being able to connect the dots instead of the risk factor. And so that's really what pushed me towards trying to help people. And I realized that the tech that we were using was very much like a microwave oven, right? Like, everyone's got a microwave in their house, but I could count on one hand the number of people who can explain to you physically how a microwave actually works, right? You put stuff in, you press a button, it heats up food. But how does it actually work? We don't know. We trust the technology. We just know hot food comes out the other end. So that's very much what started to happen with society, was that we were like, I just trust the tech. I need to connect to someone. I'm going to press a button. It's going to launch a video. I'm going to end up in a video call. I just trust the tech.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Exactly. Especially that is a very perfect example and relatable in terms of just like trusting the microwave and just kind of fingers crossed on technology and let it do the work. But in terms of work on that topic there, when I look at your work, it's clear that privacy's got no age. You talk to seniors, you talk to kids alike about the importance of privacy, but how difficult is it to have these conversations?
Oh, in this day and age, it's very difficult because everyone wants to use technology. Either they have to because of the pandemic, they need to use technology for young children, or they see all the advantages to distracting a child. And again, as a parent, I get it. It is infinitely easier to hand a young child a tablet than it is to stop making dinner while you're trying to do a meeting, while you're trying to do something else. I get it. But so the talking to parents about pulling kids off of tech has become very difficult. Seniors who are engaging in tech are eager to learn. And one of the best programs we can do there is there's all sorts of programs where they match teenagers with seniors. And I love those because you get the teenagers who are really eager to show off how much they know about how their devices and their tablets work. And then you get the seniors who really love the company and the people. So anytime we can get those programs going, because seniors are at very high risk for scams, oversharing information. So anytime we can get that going, that's great. But with young kids, what I try and help parents understand I always use the park analogy, and I say, when your kids are really little, you go to the park with them and you push them in the swing. And then one day when they're bigger, you back up and you kind of just watch them play from a distance. And then one day your kid says, hey, can I go to the park by myself? And you say, okay, well, do you know what to do if you get injured? And do you know what to do if a stranger comes up to you? And if your kid can't answer both those questions, they're not going alone. It's the same thing with the internet and technology. If your child doesn't know what to do when they're uncomfortable online, and they don't know what to do if a stranger approaches them online, they shouldn't be unmonitored online. So I again, I appreciate the need for us to have younger kids online for schooling and all this stuff. But once that schooling is over, we need to keep them in a safer space than just being able to be online alone until they have that skill set to come back and ask for help.
That's right. And this year alone, my personal predictions is that the Internet of Things is always evolving, and we're going to be seeing lots of updates and that trend following throughout the year, I think. But nowadays, we'll see that social media accounts, it's the norm. Based on one of the reports and studies that we've seen showing the number of social network users in Canada, it's at a record 31.8 million people in 2021, with a social network penetration rate of 83%. That makes Canada one of the world's most connected online populations. But we also know that using social media, along with other digital tools, can put one's safety at risk because you're sharing, obviously, personal information online. But is it really inevitable that foregoing our privacy is the only way for us to benefit from the wide array of digital tools and social media? I know you've made some decisions to limit your use of certain tools, but why so?
Yeah, I think so. Everything has a cost, and we should know that. And you have to weigh the cost. And when it's money, it's really easy to say, "Hey, this is $100 sweatshirt, and this is a $20 sweatshirt," and you're like, "Yeah, they're the same. I'll spend $20." But often when we're looking at technology, people don't consider the cost of the data that they're giving away. And the wording I always hear is, "I have nothing to hide." It's not about hiding anything. It's about owning your data. The minute you give it away, it's someone else's to do as they want with it. So it's about the fact that you own your data and you should own who you're sharing it with. So really it's about making conscious decisions on the products you use. We have seen an uptick in things like Signal, which is a texting app that's encrypted. We have seen Brave, which runs a browser, StartPage, and I know that company. They're out of the US. They're a great company that now have an extension you can put on your browser that will block the trackers. So these are all free tools that you can get that will eliminate some cookies and some tracking and some of the extra data that's being taken. And so that's a really great thing to do. It's like a leak. Like you want, again, I like analogies, but it's like turning on a tap. You want the water to come out the tap. You don't want it leaking from other places on the pipe, right? So if I'm going to be on Google and I'm thinking, okay, look, I know they know what I'm searching and that's fine. And that's a trade I'm willing to make. But I also don't want 25 other companies collecting my data while I'm there. So adding a lot of these tools in that will help prohibit the excess data from being leaked will help you take back control of your data and your privacy by only giving the data to the systems that you want to give them to.
Yeah, do you have any further tips there, Kat, in terms of protecting your data, making sure that it's, within your scope of hands, but like in terms of subscriptions that we see on a daily basis, emails bombarding us to take our data essentially. Do you have any tips or advice on that end?
I mean, a big thing is privacy settings, which sounds trivial, but so few people actually set them and use them. And if you go into your phone, I used to say, hey, next time you're waiting for a train or something, and now everyone's home. But next time you're waiting, next time you have time to kill, open up your privacy settings in your phone and start going through them one by one. And you will be shocked at the amount of places in which you are giving away location data, apps you allow to turn on your camera, connections, again, like we had talked about with like, hey, can you connect to my contacts? So even just as simple as going through the privacy settings to ensure that every application only has access to the data at which you've given it permission to access, and siloing that data. I always say it's like, you're taking your doctor and like your partner and your best friend and your boss and putting them in the same room and saying, hey, you guys tell each other everything you know about me. You would never do that. So you don't want one source to have all that data. You want the doctor source to have the medical data and the boss source to have the work data and the best friend to know all your secrets, but you don't want them shared. So we really want to disconnect the data sources to make sure they're not pooling.
Yeah, that's wonderful. On Ontario's side here, in terms of the Ontario government, privacy and cybersecurity continues to be, of course, to be the top priority in providing advice and guidance to the broader public sector. But it's also the home of privacy by design. And we've got world-renowned privacy advocates, but how do you help an organization, especially coming from the broader public sector, embed privacy considerations from the get-go rather than, an afterthought?
Yeah, that's a great question. So privacy by design, for anyone who isn't familiar, is a set of 7 principles that was originally developed, as you said, in Ontario by Dr. Anne Cavoukian, who was the privacy commissioner for Ontario years ago. It has been adopted. I was actually just reading the India data protection law. It is in there. It is in GDPR. It's been adopted by all of the privacy regulations because they're like, no, these are sound principles that we should be following, which is putting individuals first, making sure that you're not trading off privacy for security. So just starting with those principles and going through them, and you can download them 100 different ways online as a list, as a checklist. So just an easy example, because we come from the cybersecurity world, trading off cybersecurity for privacy. My favorite example of that is the 2 extra questions you ask someone to authenticate their identity. So if I don't have a password and you ask me my dog's name and the street I grew up in, you are actually trading privacy for security. So you are asking me for more private information to better secure my account with authentication. That is not a good design decision. So looking at it and backing up and saying, have our design decisions, are we limiting the amount of data we take? Are we ensuring that the user knows? So another one is setting privacy by default. So if you have an option to take the location data, it is off by default and someone can choose to turn it on. Things like that. So going through that when you create your products and services is always ideal. It's part of really what a privacy impact assessment is. And certainly in, like we're talking public sector, but certainly in the medical space, privacy impact assessments, and in Ontario, have become mandatory. But they really should be mandatory. They're in most provinces and most places around the world. When you are dealing with sensitive data, you should be running that impact assessment and really evaluating whether privacy is in every step of what you're delivering or not.
Yeah, for sure. And the key feedback that we've been hearing from the broader public sector is, of course, smaller organizations, smaller agencies have challenges in terms of funding or capacity or just skill sets in-house. But did you have any recommendations for those smaller agencies there to make sure that their privacy policies are in place and they're secure?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, just even looking, and I'll pick on Ontario because it's got a great set of data, but the Ontario Privacy Commissioner, which is the OPC, has all sorts of guidance documents on setting up policies and best practices. And one thing that certainly came out around the pandemic was best practices, as an example, around virtual consultations for medical professionals. There are a number of things you need to consider if you are meeting with an individual online in a medical capacity, including, from a privacy perspective, the fact that nobody around you can hear, that you're not oversharing any other additional information. There's rules around if you can record the session or not. And so a lot of the commissioners provided a lot of downloadable guidance that small companies can look at. There's also cybersecurity guidance, right, for small business. So downloading that is a great place to start. To be able to say, oh, well, we're implementing this program. Is there like a pre-packaged process that we can just release on all of our individuals to help understand this better?
Great. And for our audience today, if users have a privacy question or concern about a process or product, like how would you advise them to seek responses?
If from the company that's producing it?
That's right.
Yeah. So okay. So as part of all privacy policies, which are not always written well. So privacy is a journey, not a destination. We're all getting there, and because of all these regulations, people didn't know about regulations. Like we've had PIPEDA in Canada for 20 years, and yet still companies are going, "Pa what?" So people didn't know they had to have this. There are certain specifications around a privacy policy, and inside the privacy policy should be contact information for the privacy officer or representative from that company who deals with privacy. Because I am a complete and total privacy geek, I once a week I probably email one of these people nicely just to say, hey, I think you're missing something, you might want to stick this on there. One company automatically logged in to PayPal when I wanted to pay for something, even though I didn't want to automatically log into PayPal. I may or may not have emailed the privacy officer from Wordle to find out what information is being exchanged on social media every time someone posts a Wordle score, which is a game that everyone seems to be playing right now. So the contact information should be there, but I will tell you, I don't get fast responses. But that would be the method. You should be able to go into the privacy policy. You should be able to go there. If you have a real and legitimate concern, like you're worried your information has been breached or there's a concern and that person does not answer, then you escalate up to the commissioner in your geographical region, wherever that would be.
Wonderful. Well, not wonderful to the response of not getting any responses on that front. So hopefully we can make some better efforts on that side there for any of our listeners here today. But in terms of tools, did you recommend any tools for users to really use to evaluate the privacy frameworks of a particular software?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's there's no certification for compliance. We're not like in a security world where we have SOC 2 or ISO in a sense that you can say, hey, we're SOC 2 compliant, we've been certified. That doesn't exist in the privacy world, especially when it comes to regulations like GDPR. So if somebody says they're GDPR compliant, you're basically taking their word for it. And without outing people, I have certainly gone into clients who go, yeah, we're GDPR compliant, and then I run an assessment on them and they're missing a lot of stuff. So in order to get certified, that doesn't exist. So you want to be careful with that and you want to do your own evaluations. If you are bringing in vendors to your company or tools for yourself, certainly for yourself, you want to look at the privacy policy and read it and make sure there aren't a lot of the word may. We may take your data, we may transfer it, we may do this, because then that's basically a version of a privacy policy where it's like, you know what, we're not sure, so just sign this and then we can do whatever we want and you can't complain because you agreed. So I would be wary of that. From a corporate perspective, interestingly enough, vendor management has been a really big thing for me because I find it's missing from the privacy side. So we often have these security surveys we send to vendors to have them fill out about security safeguards. But from a privacy perspective, you need your vendors to sign off on your master service agreement or the statement of work, but you need them sign off that if they have a breach of data that belongs to you and your clients, they are obligated to tell you about that breach. They need to actually sign off on that, or they're not obligated to tell you about that breach. So you want to make sure that you have that in a contract. And then again, you also want to make sure that they're following the same level of both technical and procedural safeguards that you are. Because if you don't have that, again, signed in a contract that says, you know, we don't share data, we anonymize it if we're going to do something with it. If they don't have that in a contract, again, there's no guarantees that your vendor isn't going to take your client data and do whatever they want with it.
That's right. Those are really helpful tips there, Kat. And personally, being a big advocate for learning and development, I'd like to pick your brain on if there's any books or documentaries, especially for our listeners here today, just to really look into if they want to learn more on the privacy side.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots. So I will recommend. Most people have Netflix. I will say there are 3 documentaries on Netflix that are worth watching. There's The Great Hack, there's The Social Dilemma, and then there's Coded Bias. And they are all, they really cover the technology, but they do it in a fun and entertaining way that even non-technical people can certainly take a lot away from it. There were certainly, I mean, I can watch them and go, yep, I knew that. But most people who are watching are like, oh, I had no idea. And what they do cover is the way that the algorithms are designed behind the technology. Like, you want to see what you want to see, but they explain how they don't really care about what you want. They care about you spending more money. They care about you doing certain actions. And so it's designed not to make you happy or to show you more cute puppies. It's really designed to have you spend more money. And I think when people become more aware of that, they're a little more cautious, like we said, about where they put their time and energy in downloading. because then they're like, wait a minute, I am the product. So you're not serving me, I'm serving you. So I'm just going to use you the way I want to use you. And so that awareness is really good. So I did write down book titles because I didn't want to forget them. I had asked a while ago, I actually asked a bunch of privacy professional friends and I was like, what do you guys recommend? I'm putting together a list. But certainly always at the top is The Age of Surveillance, which is Shoshana Zuboff. And she is in one, if not multiple, of those documentaries. She's fantastic. She's a Harvard professor, and she really talks again about how data is collected and where we go from data collection to surveillance. I mean, surveillance has a different connotation to it, and it's a little bit creepy. So, are we being surveilled? The next one is The Art of Invisibility. That's Kevin Mitnick. Kevin Mitnick, for anyone who doesn't know, is all social engineering. He is the master of explaining how we use psychology, even the background on where our phishing campaigns came from, right? That is a form of social engineering where you trick someone into thinking that they are something they're not. But he's fantastic, and that's a great book. Weapons of Math Destruction is Kathy O'Neill. That one is all about the data, big data, and what we're doing with it. And when we say big, like I know Meta's data is in the, I don't even know what the word is, gazillion, whatever it is. It's like a beyond trillion. It's again, and it's up and up, gazillion, whatever it is. The sheer quantity of data that they're collecting. So people again need to understand that. And the last one, as you talk about privacy by design, which I was going to show, but I'm blurred. So thank you, Zoom, for blurring. But Privacy is Hard and 7 Other Myths. That one is Jaap Henk Houtman, and that one is, it's brand new. It just came out right before Christmas. And he has something else you can download free online, which is the Little Blue Book of Privacy by Design. So anyone listening who's like, where do I get more guidance on privacy by design? He has real tangible implementation strategies around privacy by design. Like, here's how you obfuscate information. Here's how you make it less targeted at an individual. So his book is all about the fact that people who are designing right now are saying, well, I can't do that, it's too hard, I can't possibly accommodate for privacy. But you can, and it's real ways on how to do that. So those would be some of the suggestions for sure.
That's great. Definitely going to be part of my list in terms of my read and getting up to speed with everything privacy there. But did you have any suggestions in terms of the order for, especially for someone who is new in the privacy world, suggestions on the books that you've noted?
Oh, no, I think, okay, so privacy is big and wide, and you can specialize in all sorts of niches in privacy, much like cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, if you, I mean, we've all probably seen, hopefully at this point, the tree diagrams of, you know, you've got governance, and then you've got all sorts of pieces of cybersecurity. They're also pieces of privacy. So if there's something that really interests you in privacy, if it is social engineering and helping understand that from an educational perspective, or to develop tools that prohibit it, because you have to think like a hacker to stop a hacker. And that's where our white hat hackers come from, right? If it is privacy by design, which is where my love is helping people at that design stage to really acknowledge and say, hey, do you really need a birth date? Or could you use a birth year? Because that's far less risky. So that would be the privacy by design side. There's certainly a lot around surveillance right now. There is a law that's being looked to be passed in the US to ban surveillance advertising, which would be very interesting for a lot of these big players like Facebook and Instagram. If that passes through, then we will only get contextual advertising. So what that means is, instead of getting an ad for the yoga pants I looked up yesterday, I will only get ads for yoga pants if I search something related to yoga. Otherwise, I am only getting ads related to the things that I'm searching. So that's kind of an interesting switch. So I think it's, as you're saying, like, it really depends on where your interest is, because the jobs in privacy have enormous breadth right now.
It's great. And to kind of further challenge and kind of pick your brain there, Kat, is just around just predictions, especially we're kicking off the new year. It just within the privacy world. What are your predictions?
Oh God, that's a hard one. Um, Unfortunately, I think I think we're going to dig the hole before we figure out how to fill it. We're uncovering a lot of issues. In Canada, there was a discovery that maybe public health had been gathering more location data than required in the COVID tracing. So I think there's going to be a distrust of tools, which in some ways is a healthy thing. I think we have an over-trusting, like I said at the beginning, we have an over-trusting of technology. And so I think a lot of reveals around, like the catalyst was really the whole Cambridge Analytica, when people said, Facebook's doing what? Again, some people knew that, but most people had no idea. So I think having some of these big, not even breaches, but misuses of data that are being published and are better understood will help the individuals to say, oh, okay, I don't want to use that app because there might be a risk to it, or I want to think twice about downloading this other thing. So I think the really big thing, like I said, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better from the privacy side. But from an individual side, I'm hoping that when people see the risks, they will have a better awareness of some of the misuses of their data.
For sure, that's very valuable advice there. In our last episode, Kat, we talked everything about the cybersecurity talent gap. How do we bridge this gap? How do we bring more talent and skills into the cybersecurity world? And especially closing the gender gap as well. In terms of, now we'll turn into privacy, in terms of, let's talk about the opportunities for folks who are looking into a career into the privacy world. Did you have any tips or advice, especially for our users today who might be exploring those options?
Yeah, so it's interesting from a privacy side because, again, I grew up in tech, so I was the only woman in the room for a very long time. In privacy, it's often flipped because privacy is very much staffed by legal, and a lot of the lawyers in privacy are women. So a lot of the data privacy offices that I work with are women, or just the general counsels that deal with privacy are women. But from the technical side, that's to me where the gap is. So we have lots of legal people that are specializing in privacy, and that's amazing. If you're legal and you have an aptitude for tech and you want to come back into this lower end, that's where we need the people. But if you are technically based where I am, there needs to be people who have a critical view. It's a problem-solving thing. I mean, I look at applications and services and I say, what is the worst thing that can happen here? And then I mitigate it. So it is really for people who love to solve problems. And I think that's the misunderstanding sometimes with privacy, because people are like, oh, it's a law and it's boring and you just have to follow a bunch of rules. And there is an aspect of that. But the rules are minimize your data collection. And so from that perspective, I now have to critically say, how can we do that? How can we minimize this data? What can we do with this data to better protect it? So that is very much, again, it's problem solving, it's analytics. And so anyone who's kind of interested in that avenue should investigate privacy, regardless of your background, whether you have a business degree or you've been tiling floors for the last 10 years. If this is something that you're excited about and you have an aptitude to learn, especially because everything is so new, nobody has 10 years experience in GDPR because GDPR was released 4 years ago. So it's not hard to catch up if you have a willingness to learn and get involved.
That's right. I completely agree. I think that one of the misconceptions that we find is that people find that separation between security and privacy, where security is generally perceived as more of a technical issue, while data privacy protection is regarded as an issue relating to data access and really protecting data from getting into the wrong hands. But I think that cybersecurity is more of a technical way, and this is the mindset that we should go moving forward of implementing data privacy choices. I'm not sure you agree with that statement there.
I do. Yeah, no, that's totally true.
Great. I see our audience has our questions coming through, and at this point, let's move on to my favorite segment of the show, which is the Q&A. So let's get our questions answered. All right. So moving on to our first question from a user. I'm looking to start a mobile app for my business. Any resources I can use to automate a privacy policy?
Oh, the automated privacy policy. Okay, so you can, but so like I had alluded to before, every privacy policy has a specific format. So if you've got consumers in California, you have to have the CCPA stuff. If you've got consumers in GDPR in Europe, you have to have some of the GDPR. And if you have consumers in Canada, you have to cover PIPEDA. So you do need to make sure you have all the areas. Now, that said, you can absolutely have everything in one privacy policy. That's not a problem. So if you're looking for a template online to get started, and just to clarify, because I get this question a lot, a privacy policy, or it's really a privacy notice that's going on your website, is not a legal document. It's a statement. The terms of service is a legal document. So from that perspective, I would highly recommend you either have a lawyer write it or approve it, whereas the privacy policy is not, and that one, yes, you can get. If you are going to download a template, you need to make sure that you adjust that template specifically to what you do as a company. So if the line says we retain data as long as needed, that's not a retention statement. That is one of these blanket, like the May statement. You need to say we retain data, for as long as you're a customer plus 2 years since you've last used it, or as long as legally required, but you can't just say as long as we need it. So that would be the caveat. You really do need to make sure the data collection is specific. California, for example, needs you to list every vendor for whom you're giving the data to. So you would have to have that there. So just make sure, again, it is specific. It has to say what you do, and you have to do what it says.
That's right. All right, moving on to our second question here on the line. Talking about the privacy talent gap. When someone is new in the field, how will they get a job within the privacy field?
That's a great question too. Okay, so I on LinkedIn, because of the job description I have, I get emails every week with all of the available jobs that match my LinkedIn profile. So they always say, you dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Your LinkedIn profile should read for the job you want, not for the job you have. So if there are indications in your LinkedIn profile about a preference towards privacy or interest in privacy, then LinkedIn actually has some fantastic AI behind it that will give you those jobs. I will tell you right now, there is a massive shortage in privacy, massive. In cybersecurity in general, there's a 0% unemployment rate. But certainly for privacy, I turn down way more jobs than I can take. And we have a breadth of opportunity in privacy. There are senior jobs and there are junior jobs. So if you can't find them, it's not because they don't exist. It's just because you haven't found where they're posted yet. But there are certainly, if you are looking for something more senior, sometimes going through a recruiting agency is a great idea because they will know those jobs that need to be filled. And if you are looking for something more junior, I would search for privacy analyst, privacy manager. I would just search the word privacy. But again, update your LinkedIn profile, so long as you have one, to indicate your interest and aptitude for privacy.
That's great. And LinkedIn is a great channel, especially on our side here. And the advice that we share out with our co-ops and interns at the Ontario government is always make sure that you've got a updated LinkedIn page, because you just never know which employers out there seeking for those skill sets or expertise to bring you on board as well, right? So I'm hearing LinkedIn, go through, and if you want more of a senior position, go through an agency. But update your profile is always a must, and all your accomplishments. All right, Kat, we've got time for 2 more questions. Our next question is, I need to do a PIA for my not-for-profit, and we have limited budget. Are there any tools we can use?
Oh, okay. So PIAs vary depending on where you are. So the first thing you want to do is look at the regulation that you're under. So as an example, if you're in Canada, every single province has its own PIA structure, and every commissioner provides an outline of what that should look like. If your not-for-profit is medically based, then there are specifics for medical PIAs. It is very difficult to download like a pre-made template. Some provinces have them. Usually it's guidance. Usually it's your PIA must include this, 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 and this. There's actually there's some basics that are in all PIAs. So talking about your governance and accountability model, like who in your company is responsible for privacy, what kind of policies and procedures do you have in place, showing any kind of system architecture around how data is collected and stored, showing a data flow diagram, which basically says data is collected from this individual and then passed to this server and then accessed by this individual, will show where data is in your system. Description of how your system works, how is it retained, and showing that the data is limited. Again, it's for use. So all the data that you collect for your system or your product or your service is specific to use. You can indicate why. I'm going to assume you're not doing GDPR because GDPR is a data protection impact assessment and has a few more categories in it. But again, go first to the resident authority from your region and just type in, PIA template or PIA guidance, and it will set you up. Unless you have a very complicated, like if I run a PIA on a medical app, and that's an application that's taking technology, honestly, they run 60, 70 pages. But if I'm going to run a PIA on a not-for-profit that's got like one stream of data basically in service, that could be much smaller and much easier to do. So you should be able to do that on your own.
All right, thanks, Kat. Hopefully that was useful for whoever asked that question. Moving on to our last question for today. A company, they can possess a personal information of millions of customers. Are there any legal implications for those companies?
Absolutely. So we have privacy regulations, again, in every region and for every customer type. The strictest that we have right now is GDPR, which is out of the EU, and then Bill 64, which just got approved out of Quebec. California has one for consumers, but it's very specific to consumers. And certainly, again, there's more coming. Like India's got one that's coming. Australia has one. China's got the PIPL. There are other ones in other countries. So depending on where you are, it will be under that regulation. And most of the regulations apply both to the company within that region and to the type of customer. So if you have a company in Canada, but you're dealing with European data, you will also fall under GDPR because you are bringing data from Europe. So you might fall under multiple regulations, but that will indicate how you are allowed to process data. And processing, to be clear, is collection, transfer, storage, analysis. It's anything you do to that data. So it will have strict indications of what you can and cannot do.
That is very interesting. I'm learning a lot today from our privacy expert. Thank you very much, Kat. We're now at the end of our session. Again, thank you very much for coming on to our show. We hope to see you back again soon. And a special thank you to those who've watched and participated. We hope that you were able to get some valuable insight in terms of why cybersecurity and privacy is more important than ever. If you like this session, be sure to come back next month as we'll be holding monthly sessions on various cybersecurity topics like today with new guest speakers lined up. Stay cyber safe and see you next time. And thanks very much, Kat.
Thank you.